All right, so I want us to talk about the Structural Adjustment Program as an alternative policy or strategy for African development to the import substitution industrialization. Generally, the Structural Adjustment Program, SAP, was described as an export-led growth strategy. Under it, Africans were to manufacture goods using cheap labor for export. Again, under SAP, Africans were to embark upon resource-based industrialization where natural resources were to be exported. Moreover, Africans were to embark on agric demand-led industrialization where agricultural products were exported, and at the same time, a strong local market was created in order to facilitate some form of industrialization. Structural Adjustment Program as a strategy thrived on international trade, unlike import substitution industrialization, and hence it strived to build on the comparative advantages of countries. Again, unlike import substitution industrialization that attributed African underdevelopment to external factors, Structural Adjustment Program, among others, linked the causes of African underdevelopment to internal factors like overvaluation of currency, availability of subsidies, government is subsidizing virtually everything, over bloated public service, state dominating the economy, etc. Proponents of this strategy argued that there will be no development if the market forces are curtailed. If you expand the frontiers of the state and the state becomes so overbearing to the point that market forces are curtailed from playing their role in the economy. Again, the SAP proponents believe that developmental goals of Africans, for the developmental goals of Africans to be achieved, it was necessary for the frontiers of the state to be rolled back. There were two main policies under the Structural Adjustment Program. We have the stabilization policies under the stabilization phase, and then policies under the adjustment phase. So two main phases of Structural Adjustment Program: the stabilization phase and adjustment phase. In terms of the stabilization phase, the policies that were to be introduced and to be implemented included: number one, cutting down of spending, government to cut down spending, especially on frivolous and unnecessary things, reducing subsidies, government not subsidizing everything. If you are subsidizing something, cut subsidies or reduce them. Freezing of wages. Freezing of wages here simply means that don't allow people to be asking for pay increment, for a long time. Freeze wage at a particular level for a long time. Devaluation of currency, so that overvaluation of currency will mean that people would need small currency amount to get big foreign currency. If you overvalue your currency, you need small currency amount to get big foreign currency. Devaluation of currency would then mean a certain attraction or attractiveness to foreign investors. If you devalue your currency, a foreign investor will come to your country because they know that with a little of their currency, you'll get enough of your currency. And then another policy under the stabilization phase is domestic revenue mobilization. So let us ensure that we widen the tax net and collect more taxes. Reduction in government employment. So people who are pretending to be working and government pretending to be paying them must be dealt with. You don't like overstaffing, so people should be retrenched, redeployed, and we should, as much as possible, cut down or downsize government employment. And then introduction of user fees, so that user fees may include road tolls and other things, other services that are rendered for you by the state. There is user fee introduction, and then you must pay. Then we have the adjustment phase of the Structural Adjustment Program. Now, under the adjustment phase, the number one, market forces were to be allowed to play their role in determining the economic decisions to be made. Number two, private sector was supposed to be promoted as against the state or the public sector. Number three, there was supposed to be massive privatization and the divestiture of state-owned industries and public corporations. So state-owned industries that had been set up and were running at a loss, they were to be sold, or they were to be divested, or they were to be privatized. Then you also had liberalization of trade. Open your country so that people can come in to trade, and you can trade amongst yourself. And then promotion of exports. So focus more on exports rather than on imports. Now, these were some of the policies that were introduced or implemented under the adjustment phase of the structural adjustment program. Now, in terms of adoption of the strategy, I will say that African leaders had to adopt this strategy because it was a prerequisite for borrowing more money and aid from the Bretton Woods institutions. And so if you don't adopt it, you will not get money. So even though it was an imposition of austerity measures on the people, and regimes they didn't like it because you are going to inflict hardships on the people, you are going to ask people to sack people from their jobs, you are going to abolish subsidies, and you are going to introduce user fees and all that. I mean, these were going to be introducing hardships on the people, and so African leaders generally didn't like it. But because the strategy was a prerequisite for aid, they had no option than to accept it. In terms of success, you can talk about the economies of many African countries around the time of implementation growing from between 3 to 5%. And where it was successful, we can say that SAP led to the reduction of balance of payment deficit, and it also led to improved availability of quality goods on the market, because you have liberalized trade, and so people could bring in foreign products, foreign goods that were of a certain quality to your country, rather than during the era of ISI, or import substitution industrialization, where you could talk about a lot of shoddy goods in the system because the products were just manufactured for local consumption. In terms of the negative consequences of SAP, you can talk about social and political backlash because of its austerity features that brought immediate and untold hardships on the people, leading to much riots, demonstrations, and conflict. And there were several attempted coups against the regimes that introduced and implemented them. Again, it was seen as a neo-colonial strategy, because Africans felt that their introduction and implementation meant we had returned to the era of colonial rule. Now, also, like I said, it also led to several rule of repression. It led to repressive rule. People who critiqued the strategy and led demonstration and all that were brutalized and repressed by their regimes, because the regime needed the loans and the aid so much to keep themselves in power and to run their country. It also led to massive retrenchment and unemployment among the people. So people were asked to go home, they lost their jobs, and also it led to the oversupply of export products, which meant a reduction in prices of the product exported, with its attendant consequence of reducing income to countries that were practicing implementing this strategy. maybe last but not the least, you can talk about the fact that it led to the overexposure of African economies to global competition, which was also very risky. Now, because of the severe hardships that had been imposed on the people due to the implementation of this strategy for African development, I'm talking about SAP, there was a review of the Economic Commission of Africa had severely critiqued the strategy, and so subsequently it led to a review of the strategy and the introduction of other mitigating measures to deal with the challenges that had been imposed on the people because of the implementation of the strategy. So you had PAMSCAD, the Program of Action to Mitigate the Social Cost of Adjustment, for instance, being introduced following the review of the strategy. And this PAMSCAD sought to give a human face to the implementation of structural adjustment program through job creation and other poverty alleviation strategies which got introduced to be able to sweeten the pain of the implementation of this particular strategy for African development. Then they also introduced the Structural Adjustment Participatory Review Initiative. It was introduced as a means to tolerate civil society inputs and criticisms regarding the implementation of the program. Previously, the implementation of the program was intolerant of dissenting views. If you critiqued it, you were repressed and brutalized. But the Structural Adjustment Participatory Review Initiative, SAPRI, was introduced to open the opportunity for CSOs and other individuals who had opinions and inputs to make about the implementation of the strategy to be able to make so. So I would draw the curtains on the discussion of structural adjustment program down here. It was a good strategy, but if you look at what it brought to Africans and vis-a-vis the challenges and negative consequences, it's been argued that it appears that in spite of the fact that it was good, its negative consequences on Africa surpassed its positive consequences. We'll look at another strategy for African development in the next lecture called Lagos Plan of Action. Thank you.